I have to admit that prior to California's redistricting in 2011, I was against having a commission, partly because I kind of came up through the state legislature and I saw how, redistricting was a way to get Republicans to come across the aisle and vote for a state budget, or get Republicans and Democrats to work together on policy stuff within these redistricting years because they had to work together. And also just, I felt like, I wanted to work on redistricting. And when they said, oh, it's going to be a statewide commission, I thought, well, great. It's going to be some black box. It's going to be like, these people are going to act like quasi judges. There's not going to be any public engagement, really. It's just going to be a bunch of people sitting at dais and deciding the lines in this kind of hidden fashion. But what we really found was that the redistricting in this commission-based style was actually really open and transparent, and really something that was able to draw good lines. And I really like the work that the last commission did, and I'm excited to see commissions happening in more states.
So how are these political cartographers, so to speak, how are they held accountable by the public?
So the commission, they're not held accountable to the public in the same way as an elected official is, obviously. I think that they want to draw lines that, I think that they're concerned about, like, their reputation. I think they're concerned about the reputation of the commission process as a whole. I think they're concerned about making sure that lines they draw are reflective of communities of interest locally, and not reflective of where incumbents live or the political outcomes. So I guess accountability for the lines isn't exactly like a high point of the commission process, because accountability for the lines would be more common if, like, a city council is the one actually drawing the lines, and then afterwards somebody doesn't like the lines, they can vote those people out.
Right.
That lever isn't there, but in a way that lever is replaced with a with a lay board that is drawing lines in a more ministerial way. Honestly, way it's drawn in more countries. In a lot of countries, the line drawing process, shockingly, is just apolitical. If you're drawing districts in England, it's like a division of civil government that actually draws lines, and nobody ever thinks about, like, trying to manipulate it. Legislatures manipulating and going overboard is, I think, what's pushed it into this commission process. And this commission process, I think, tries to get this thing to be less a political game and more of a, let's define the proper criteria. Let's try to follow those criteria. Let's draw districts that aren't, kind of a manipulation or a gerrymander of the process.
I would have some reservations about the trust factor and the buy-in, particularly from folks on the right. I hope there is a way to make it less egregious and winner take all, as it seems to have become. But
what's funny about that is that the polarization on commissions, Republicans were the ones that got the commission done in California. It was Republicans that pushed it. It was Republicans that have pushed redistricting reform for decades until now. And I'll tell you, this is one little secret of redistricting world. In the last 10 years, you've seen Democrats running around the country and a lot of activism around the idea of converting to commissions. And you've seen Republicans almost flip and be like, oh, I guess we're not really into commissions anymore. And it's largely because of what happened in California. One redistricting cycle. And in that one redistricting cycle, California's commission drew lines that actually ended up being good for Democrats, in part because California had been doing incumbent protection for so long that they were kind of allowing more Republican seats to exist than should, because they were giving Republicans district draws that they needed to get votes on the budget. So, so California has a commission. California has a commission process that ultimately ends up benefiting Democrats more than Republicans, just by the nature of their starting point and maybe just luck. The luck part is that the commission was supposed to have 3 drafts. The first draft was not good for Democrats. The second draft was good for Democrats. The third draft, they ran out of time, so they just went with a second draft. And that literal, like, second draft to third draft process, if they'd gone to a third draft, it would have been better for Republicans. you might not have seen Democrats running around the country saying like, hey, let's do commissions. You might have seen Republicans being like, yeah, we need commissions. Look at what we did here. A lot of this perception about winners and losers from the commission process is has evolved from an n equals 1 sample. And, if somebody said like, I got my poll back, boss, here's my poll, and it's a poll and it's of one person's response, you would throw it away. But in this case, since California's was so big, and since it helped drive a lot of perceptions around it, and we're going to see what happens this redistricting cycle, and it might be different. One reason why it might be different significantly was that the last redistricting, remember, was done in 2000, after the 2010 election cycle. It was done in 2011, and it was followed by a presidential. Good for Democrats. This one is being done after the 2020 cycle. It's being done in 21. It's going to be followed by a midterm, gubernatorial, first term of a change in the presidential, in the control of White House and of Congress. And if 22 is a great year for Republicans, you could see all these commission states flip a bunch of seats to Republicans. You could see Republicans gain seats in the House. And all of a sudden, like, maybe people retool their thinking about, whether it's good for Democrats or Republicans.
Well, so I was at the NRCC in 2012, and I was not involved in redistricting, but I remember the vibe there was that Republicans here on the ground were kind of caught flat-footed by the commission process and weren't really prepared for it as much as they felt Democrats were. And in terms of like having candidates for the commission and things like all the whole and really understanding the process. And so I remember after that, there was a lot of talk of, and some people I've talked to here feel like they're more prepared for it this time, or understand how it's going to work better than they did before.
Yeah, I mean, there were some quotes from Matt Rexroad where he was, flailing his arms around, telling people like, hey, pay attention to this, pay attention to this. And people were like, oh no, nothing to do there. And yeah, potentially there were some missed opportunities for them.